Hello and welcome to episode 12 of Breaching Extinction. This week we had the privilege of interviewing Taylor Shedd, program coordinator for Soundwatch, a research and educational organization which focuses on understanding and bettering the relationship between whales and boats.
Thank you for taking the time to let us interview you. So can you tell us your name and background and all that jazz?
My name is Taylor Shedd. I am currently the Soundwatch program coordinator here at the Whale Museum. I am originally from Indiana, like all great marine biologists, and ended up in the Pacific Northwest. Actually, when I was in high school working for a whale watch company as a naturalist. I then got my undergrad at the University of Hawaii in marine biology, and then my master's at Scripps down in San Diego, and did my master's on the foraging ecology of the southern residents. So tied all back around and ended up here at the Whale Museum. And I've been here for 2 years now in this position.
Very cool.
That's awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about what Soundwatch is and the history of how it came to be?
Yes, so Soundwatch is the on-the-water research and education program of the Whale Museum, and it started in the late 90s or in the early 90s, 1993, as there was an increase in interest and knowledge about the southern resident killer whales up here in Washington, and also a growing commercial whale watch fleet and just private vessels. This is the same year that the first Free Willy movie came out, so there's just a lot of interest and hype around the whales. So there was a need for on-the-water education and also monitoring of these vessels interacting with this population. And then, Soundwatch grew as the industry did and as the whales continued to decline through both Canada and the U.S. listing the population as endangered. We've been strong partners in the Be Whale Wise campaign, which is a big partnership of education and outreach for just all marine wildlife viewing in the Salish Sea. A lot of the research that we have collected over the years has gone through to inform those management decisions as, vessels are one of the top 3 main threats to the southern residents. So, we kind of play that key role of being on the water every day, doing like passive observational data that goes back all the way until 1993.
Nice. And can you explain to people why vessels are problematic for the whales?
Yeah, so there's a few different impacts that vessels have on marine mammals, in particular for the southern residents. There are orca whales, which are actually the largest member of the dolphin family, so they echolocate, which means they produce very high frequency noise like sonar, like bats. And the frequency that those clicks are at are very similar to what engines, especially small, high RPM outboard engines, the frequency that those engines produce in the water is about the same as what the orca whales are in. So there's kind of this masking disturbance of that, the noise of the boats is the same frequency at which these whales are communicating in. And then there's big, large vessel traffic, which is more of a low frequency. That's kind of just more of a constant noise. Like if you're at a cocktail party or whatever, you always talk a little bit louder. Or the morning after you go to a concert, you wake up and you can't hear anything. It's because your body has actually shifted to the ambient noise that you're used to. So there's the noise factor, and then there's the actual physical disturbance of, we've had boats that have ran over whales, or boats that get too close to whales while they're foraging. They stop foraging and they travel more. They swim closer to shore, that kind of thing. So there's kind of the indirect disturbance through acoustics and the direct physical disturbance by boats just getting too close to the whales sometimes.
Okay. So do you guys usually use hydrophones to collect acoustic data while you're monitoring them as well?
We don't, on Soundwatch, we don't really do too much acoustic data since we're on a boat ourselves and have to move around with the whales. We can't really sit still for too long. The Whale Museum is a partner with SMRU Consulting, who does a lot of the hydrophones for the Orca Network, and the Whale Museum runs the hydrophone at the Limekiln Lighthouse. So we have access to that data and utilize it sometimes, but a lot of our stuff mainly just focuses on above the water.
Okay, nice. Let's see. So do your roles from the past differ from your present role? Like when you guys started, or is it pretty much consistent?
I think it's evolved and adapted as the times have, but it's still the same premise of on-the-water education, because back in the early 90s, it was just letting people know that there were whales here and what was going on. And now, lots of people in Western Washington and people visiting this area know that there are whales around and something's going on. And, we've had the Governor's Task Force in 2018, 2019. There's been new vessel regulations. It's kind of been in the news. 2018, there was J35 who carried a deceased calf. There's J50 who was a young whale that passed away. So it was very heightened in the media. So there's people that are aware of it. Our education message and everything has kind of shifted, and, our data has become more important as we get changes in vessel regulations to see, how that affects the whales and how it affects boaters. And we have lots of different user groups or stakeholders up here. We have a commercial whale watch fleet, we have recreational fishermen, we have kayaks, we have private boaters, we have large tankers. And, how they all interact in this environment and with the whales is very different. So looking at those different groups of vessels as these changes come forward has been very interesting.
No doubt. I'm in the process of reading Monica Shields' book, Endangered Orcas, and she's talking about how these are like the most watched whales in the world. And I've kind of found, this is anecdotal, like I don't have any scientific evidence or data, but it seems to me like this is some of the most responsible like ecotourism that I've ever seen, or most like well-studied ecotourism. How do you think other organizations can learn from like Soundwatch or other things, or where do you think we can improve as well?
Yeah, I think the Southern residents are unique in that we know every single individual in the population and they're very identifiable. I hear the comparison to like elephants. In Africa, in that they know every individual, they know how old they are. We have genetics on most of them, we have hormone data on some of them throughout their lifetime. So we know them very well, kind of like on an individual basis. But yeah, the Salish Sea human population has been growing almost exponentially the past 10, 20, 30 years. So yeah, they are heavily watched from shore, from land. Kind of their location is pretty much usually always known, or at least hypothesized by lots of people. The whale watch industry has always been very organized here. The Pacific Whale Watch Association, which most active commercial whale watch boats are a part of. They've been around for a long time, have been partners with Soundwatch and the Whale Museum and other groups for a while. And, they've definitely adapted and grown as they've gotten more boats, more companies, bigger boats, getting rid of smaller, older boats. They are, at the forefront of being good eco-tour companies. Your question was if they are the best. I don't know if they're the best.
Are they the best? But like, how can
bad about them?
Yeah, no, of course not. But like, how can other places learn? Because I've definitely I've been to Tanzania, and I talked about this on a different episode. But I had a really impactful experience where there were at least 100 safari vehicles getting in the way of a lion trying to hunt down a zebra, and that's always stuck with me. So what can other organizations learn from things out here, or how can we improve as well? Because even if we are really good, there's always room to improve.
Yeah, and going back to your comment that these are the most watched whales in the world, yes, no, probably, maybe. I think these whale watch boats are some of the most watched boats in the world.
True.
With lots of people living out here on the islands, on shore. These boats are always in front of someone's house. So I think the boats are probably the most watched whale watch fleet in the world. I would say that for sure. So I think the Whale Watch Association has been very aware of that and adapted to that as keeping numbers of boats down around certain groups of whales, especially with the heightened awareness of the plight of the southern residents and just the public's concern over whale watching. I think that whale watch boats, the commercial fleet, has definitely been targeted as a negative impact to the whales, maybe a little bit biasly. So, yeah, I think they've done a good job in kind of creating their own, within the association, their own kind of like regulations to try to minimize the number of boats that are around a single group of whales and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think they're taking steps to be better. I mean, everyone that works on whale watch boats, like you guys, you all love the whales and want to do right by them and want to educate people and everything. So I don't think they're out there trying to, hurt the whales in any way. So I think they're, trying to do the best that they can. But it's hard. I mean, it's a huge industry. There's lots of money to be made. There's an expectation. People have all seen the Free Willy movies. They know that they jump. They know that they play. Like,
What time are the whales?
I think that's
What
one of
time
the
do they
most
jump?
that's the most frequent question we get is when do they jump, when do they breach?
Yeah, and so it's almost like a public perception and marketing scheme is every single whale watch brochure you pick up has a breaching whale on the cover. So that's what everyone expects. They all want that Instagram, that Facebook photo or whatever of like the amazing whale. So when you're sitting at the state regulation 300 yards and they're asleep or something, I luckily don't take out paying customers on my boat, so I can't imagine what that pressure is sometimes. So it's definitely a public perception kind of thing of how these boats have to behave to people looking at them and how people on the boat want that boat to behave to get close to the whales or something. So
For sure.
it's tricky.
Yeah. What kind of data have you guys found, or what have the findings been with the different groups of boats that you've looked at?
Yeah, so our data is unique in that it's a long time series. So since 1998, our data set has pretty much been the same. It's had to adapt as vessel regulations changed, because what was illegal in 1998, you had to stay 100 yards away from all marine mammals. In 2008, it became 200 yards with southern residents, and then now 2018, Canada made theirs to 200 meters, and then 2019, Washington State made it 300 meters, Canada made it 400. So it's had to adapt over time, but definitely that long time series, looking at growth of the commercial industry, growth of private boats up here, and then how almost the public perception of whales has changed with people back in the day, oh, I'm a local, I've been here for a long time, so I know how to behave around the whales, and they know my boat, I can get close to them, they know me, I behave right. Now it's kind of shifted to more, we all want to give them space, we want to be as far away as we can, but then, there's some people who just aren't aware or oblivious to what's going on, so now kind of, at least our biggest struggle is, small vessels at high speed traveling in close proximity to the whales. We didn't really see that, in the early 90s, late 90s. We didn't really see that kind of incident happening. So yeah, it's changed a lot, and it changes year to year. Almost, the whale watch commercial industry, number of boats have kind of plateaued at this point. It seems like it's reached its stabilizing point. There's companies that are adding bigger boats and getting rid of smaller boats, but then there's more companies cropping up, so it's kind of found its plateau of boats out on the water. But we keep getting more and more private boats, and more of them from what I would call South Sound down in Seattle.
Really?
There's obviously been a big population growth down there, especially in income levels, people that work for big tech companies or whatever, they're looking at some of the boating data, they're all pulling together 5 friends and buying a boat and then coming up here on the weekends or for 4th of July or something, whereas back in the day, a lot of the boats that we saw here were Anacortes, Bellingham, local islanders, and now we're getting more and more people that are coming up from South Sound or chartering boats and maybe aren't from this area, so then the education message has to shift and your target audience is shifting. So it used to be really great for us to be up here on San Juan Island and we could just go out and talk to people on the dock and inform them about what was going on, but now it's like, oh man, I have to reach the how many ever million people living in Seattle. So
right, yeah.
it's definitely shifting.
So it seems as though your tool for combating these issues is through education, correct?
A lot of it is education right now, just because there are so many users and different users up here in this area, but it's not the only arrow in the quiver. There has to be a lot of other stuff going on. So, the research, the management, the public-private partnerships, all that kind of stuff has to happen simultaneously, but education is a big piece. Our attention span is very short. And, even though the residents have been on the news multiple times, there's still a lack of awareness when you actually get out there on the water. And, you're watching it on TV or reading one of our posters or brochures and saying like, oh yeah, I know, I have to stay 300 yards away. But now you're on a boat on the ocean, you see whales, there's a bunch of boats around you, there's tide, there's current, there's waves, and you're like, I don't know what 300 yards looks like, or I forget what it is, I know it's a distance, maybe it's 200, maybe it's 100, I don't know. So, there's definitely like that complexity to it, and right now, the Salish Sea is interesting because it's an international boundary we're closer to Canada than we are to the U.S. mainland right now, sitting in this office, so they used the vessel regulations on either side of the border used to be synonymous, and now they're different. So then, there's lots of people that come up from Seattle that go up into the Canadian Gulf Islands, or, they're taking their boat all the way to Alaska. So they're passing from, Washington state jurisdiction and NOAA on the U.S. federal side into Canadian federal, back into Alaska state. So, they're all different, and they're different among populations. There's the southern residents, there's transient killer whales, there's northern residents once you get up into North Vancouver Island, and the vessel regulations for all those different populations are different. So it's just complex right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's definitely like a lot of key factors, and that whole international bit can throw a wrench in things or further complicate it for sure.
And that's what Be Whale Wise is all about. Be Whale Wise is a partnership between all the major players kind of up in this area to produce consistent and concise messaging for whales, so that you don't have Washington State, NOAA government, the Whale Museum, DFO, the Vancouver Aquarium, the Seattle Aquarium. You don't have all these people making different brochures saying, hey, this is what you need to know about the whales and this is how far you need to stay away from them. We all work together and produce one set of materials, campaign that is Be Whale Wise. So it's all the same branding and everything. So it should be, the same throughout this region. And it's getting more difficult with the U.S. and Canada having different regulations and different views and stuff like that. So it's a struggle, but we all still have like 30 people on a conference call once a month about Be Whale Wise. So
wow,
it's crazy, because it's it's two federal governments, a state government, local nonprofits, and educators. So
that's a lot of hands.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've still kept it tight that we're not going to translate the Be Whale Wise brochure into French. It's always up in Canada, because if Canada government, everything has to be translated into French. So it's just funny because the Be Whale Wise operates as like a nonprofit, even though it's these government entities are feeding into it. It's funny.
That is funny. So do you guys do on the water education as well?
Yeah, so Soundwatch is out on the water pretty much every day from May through September, out there when the whales are around. Obviously, we target the southern residents, so whenever they're in the area, we're on the water with them, and we're educating the private boaters that are in the area. Usually it's just, hey, how's it going? Do you have any questions? They don't have naturalists on board. They don't really know what's going on. Then we're also there to mitigate risk and disturbance away from these whales. Like I said, those boats at high speed and close proximity to the whales, we operate under a National Marine Fisheries Research Permit, so we can break the law. We can get closer to the whales than your average boat only to mitigate risk away. So we've had that before where there's, a boat that's in really close to the whales and, they're following the whales at close proximity and we can't hail them on the radio. We're waving at them. Like, we don't know what's going on. They don't get the picture, so we can move in close and just talk to them, get them to back down. Or even more often, we'll have a boat at high speed, almost on like a collision course with the whales, and we can get in front of them and just kind of say, hey guys, just be aware you're coming into an area of whales, slow down, be aware, this is how far you need to stay away. So yeah, we're out there on the water, educating people, and then, we do a bunch of other stuff too. We do dock talks in the summer, so we do just walk the docks and talk to people. We go to boat shows, and we speak to yacht clubs and other groups that come through the area. So yeah.
Do you find most people are receptive?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are receptive. I would say maybe 10% of our interactions are like neutral, or people that just don't want to hear it, don't want to talk to us, don't know who we are. I don't know. We try not to. We don't have lights. We don't have horns. We're not enforcement. We smile and say nice things to people, but I don't know. A boat approaching you. I think
people don't like to feel like they're in trouble.
Yeah, feel like they're in trouble, and then maybe 5% are like negative, and it's for a multitude of reasons. Some people out there think it's all the harbor seals, and all the harbor seals are eating the salmon, and there's very strong opinions about that. There's very strong opinions about commercial whale watch boats. There's very strong opinions about oil tankers coming through the area. So, so those are some of the interactions that we field, and just try to talk to people and let them know.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting.
But yeah, most people are receptive, and like I said, a lot of the private boats don't have naturalists on board, so even just telling people like, oh, this is J-Pod, they're like, oh my gosh, like, I didn't even know that. Like, is that the baby? And then and then we can talk about those kind of things, and oh, what are they doing here? What are they eating? Salmon? Like, the conversations can go in a multitude of directions, but usually people are super receptive to who we are. So
nice.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's really interesting. There's a lot of different things that are affecting them, and it seems like people like to cling to one thing, but it's a lot. Like, it's vessels, it's salmon, PCBs, all of it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's no silver bullet, or there's no, hey, if we spend this amount of money, we can save the whales, or like, if we do this one thing, we can save the whales. And it kind of runs the gambit of all the things happening in our society right now, from, just climate change in general, other environmental impacts, and it reaches all the way inland, where you have farmers and people talking about tearing down dams in eastern Washington and Oregon and Idaho and all those things. So yeah, it's
far-reaching.
It is far-reaching. There's lots of stakeholders.
Absolutely. What are some of the biggest challenges you find in your job, and what are some of the most rewarding things?
Biggest challenges? I don't know. I don't know. Some of the most rewarding things are when we either recontact a boat in the summer, or someone asks us a question, or you can kind of see it click for them. There's been multiple times where we'll approach a boat and it'll be like a bunch of kids, and they'll just like have a ton of questions, or they'll be like, oh, what's that whale's name? And then they'll go adopt that whale or something.
Aww.
And that's really cool. Or, we contact boats multiple times throughout the summer if they're local or something, and they'll be like, oh yeah, you're, Taylor from Soundwatch, or, one of the other drivers or whatever. And they'll be like, oh yeah, so we saw transients the other day, what's different with this one's? And so they kind of have been thinking about it, and they know who we are.
Very cool.
So that's always cool. Challenging. Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of all those things I've said is like we all want to help the whales. We all want to do the right thing and help them out. And with just so much going on, always trying to be positive and do the right thing and help out. It can be challenging. So
yeah, and everybody's got a different idea of what that looks like too, and that's probably difficult.
Absolutely. Yeah, we were watching The Whale. Have you seen that?
You've got the poster.
Oh, you got the poster, of course. But when the biggest takeaway I think that we talked about was there were so many hands in it that it just got really messy. Do you think that that's an issue having too many people in it, or do you think it's helpful to have a lot of perspectives?
I think it's useful to have lots of helpful people.
Okay.
And
Yes.
motivated people. There are some unhelpful people in this realm and some groups that are unhelpful. So yeah, that's challenging too. But no, I mean, I always think the more the merrier, but as long as you're coordinated and all working together and not being divisive. And,
True.
I don't know. I don't know if I've had a unique science experience, but I never really got I don't know, whenever you hear about the news, like, oh, scientists are just always arguing for money, and, like, that's the only thing they do is to make publications, and, you know, oh, scientists are fighting. I, like, never had that experience, kind of, until I got here, and now I understand it a little bit of, you know, there are a lot of groups out here, and there is a limited funding pool for, you know, anything environmental right now, which is, like, a whole nother complex issue. So yeah, I kind of get that a little bit now.
Yeah, Monica Shields highlights that in her book. I had Ellie read the section about that this morning. It was a little disheartening for you, I think.
Yeah, I had to sit there and just kind of absorb it. And Erica looks over at me and she's like, "You're pissed now, aren't you?" Like, yep.
I had similar to you. I hadn't really noticed scientists fighting until I came out here. I mean, I did like dolphin research in Florida for a couple of different groups, and it was fine. We worked together and it was great and shared data and all this stuff, and out here it's a little different.
Yeah, and I think it's like part of these are the most watched whales out there, so like everyone cares, you know, so lots of people, you know, hey, I really care about the whales, I really love them, or whatever, I want to do something. I'm going to go start my own nonprofit and, like, start to apply for this funding and do these things. Well, if someone else is already doing it, or maybe you're not effective at it.
Yeah. There's a ton of nonprofits out here. Like, I was shocked when I came out here. I was like, oh my gosh, like, any kind of entity that you could think of, they have it. There's so many, like, different organizations. It seems like there's definitely a lot of overlap, too. Like, we could potentially consolidate a lot, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Not my place, I guess. Can you tell us a little bit about, like, your personal experience of how you got into this field, why you like the Southern residents?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the Midwest, far from any ocean, kind of always liked the outdoors and swimming and that kind of thing, and then my family just took a vacation out here. And I think part of the reason coming out here was like, oh, there are whales here, and the Free Willy movies had come out. I watched them as a kid, so that was like part of the reason we came out here and saw the whales, and then just fell in love. You know, I like the mountains out here, the ocean, and the whales is just very different from where I grew up, so I was just drawn here. And then knew I wanted to study marine biology, and so just kind of always had that interest in whales and whatnot, and it just has carried through until now. So yeah, and you know, I think the whales are, especially the southern residents, are very unique in that, yes, we know every single individual and just, you know, how intelligent and smart they are, and how there's this social complexity to it of, you know, these are families, you know, we lose a member, how does the entire population change when you lose one individual? Like, what significance did that one individual have to the population? So in the recent years, we've all been talking about the Granny effect. Granny was this matriarchal female who was leading J-Pod, who was the oldest southern resident. I think the oldest female that we really know to science in killer whales. And then she passed away, and then we've really had some behavioral changes to the southern residents since then. So how much of that can be attributed to just losing that one individual? Like, she was alive in the 60s and 70s and 80s when there were, you know, more salmon runs, less boats, but now as that landscape has changed, you know, what memories and information did she share with her family, or, you know, whatever. So, and I don't know if we'll really know. We're trying to look at that to see, you know, what is the Granny effect of, or is it just like there's no salmon left here, so they're just spending time elsewhere? Like, does that really matter if Granny's here or not. So.
Right. What do you think we can learn from the Southern residents?
I mean, they're just one of those highlight species or populations of, but there's a ton of them, so it's almost annoying that they're just this, it's another great example of, just another population kind of suffering and on the decline from human impacts, direct and indirect impacts from humans, and all the effort that is being put towards helping them, and how that works and sometimes doesn't work, I think is really interesting.
For sure.
Yeah. But I don't know. One of my messages is always that I still have hope. I still think that there are things that are helping these whales right now and things that can help this population in the future, and that no individual should be disheartened. There are things that individuals can do every single day. You know, like with the governor's task force and all these government entities and all this stuff going on, that people shouldn't get sidelined and think like, oh, the government is going to do it. They're going to save the whales. Like, no, there's things that individuals can do every single day that'll help these whales, whether that's, I don't know, recycle more or eat sustainable seafood. Get your car cleaned at a car wash versus in your driveway. You know, when your prescriptions are up, don't just flush them down the toilet. Take them back to the pharmacy and recycle them or dispose of them properly. Like, just those little things actually add up. And so if lots of people start to do those things, that'll make a difference. So don't get disheartened and don't feel like you should just wait for someone to do something. Like, there's things that we can all do every day to help.
Absolutely. There was an interview we did that we had some technological issues, so we don't have that anymore. But we had mentioned using products like soaps and shampoos and things like that that are environmentally friendly too, so you're not putting a bunch of chemicals down the drain. We talked about Lush because they have plastic-free options, and then do either of you know the name of that? What is the organization where you can learn about sustainable seafood?
Monterey Bay.
Monterey,
Seafood Watch.
yes.
Seafood Watch.
Check that out too.
There's actually a really interesting study, I think it was done by the University of Washington, about like wastewater and stuff, and that they've seen this huge spike in lavender oil showing up in like wastewater and stuff, and like it showing up in the natural environment and being like, well, it's considered like this green product, but it like doesn't break down in the environment. So they're like finding these huge like almost oil slicks of lavender oil around.
Oh my gosh, I had no idea.
You should look that up. Don't quote me on that.
Oh my gosh, we'll have to look it up and then share it.
Yeah,
Super interesting.
I think linalool is the active ingredient. That's not like the best stuff for everything. I didn't even think of that.
I use lavender oil constantly. Oh no.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it was really interesting.
Oh my gosh, look at that. What? This is crazy.
Interesting.
Yeah, okay.
That's funny too, because we've got Pelendava out here, and
Yep.
they put that. Wow, that's a big lavender production.
Nice.
That's super funny.
Do you have any particularly memorable experiences with the Southern residents?
I mean, everyone has that like one story where, oh, I thought it looked at me and we became friends. But no, I mean, there's a bunch.
So you're not friends with the Southern residents?
I mean, I don't think they know me as an individual.
Right.
I could believe that they know maybe the Soundwatch boat. Mm-hmm. When I was at the University of Hawaii, back when I was there, the Marine Mammal Research Lab had a captive facility. We had 3 animals that were left over from the Navy program that used to be in Hawaii. So we had 3 bottlenose dolphins, and then we had a false killer whale, actually. And they could identify individual members, like individual people, and they could identify our boats and stuff like that. I don't think anyone really has enough FaceTime or interaction with the whales for the whales to like recognize a person.
For sure.
But they probably recognize boats that have been around. I feel like boats always have like a unique signature for how they sound and what they look like. So I feel like maybe they kind of get that. You know, but I saw the whales at the Lemcombe Lighthouse once in the dark, and that was really cool. And they were sleeping, and they were really close to shore. And when they're sleeping, they, you know, take big, long pauses at the surface to breathe. And, you know, we were right there on the rocks or whatever, and they all came up at the same time and just, like, hung out for 20 seconds and took 3 or 4 breaths before going back down. Like, that was really cool. Yeah, every once in a while we'll get pass-bys by whales really close, because usually when you're out there watching whales, what you should do is you should parallel their course, you know, at the appropriate distance, 300 yards in Washington State, and, you know, every once in a while, for no random reason, they will dive underwater, and at no fault of anyone, they'll just, like, pop up next to your boat. And I scream so loud every time I do that. Absolutely terrifying.
It's terrifying? You don't like it?
Well, I mean, like...
I mean, you guys are on a small boat. Are you, like, scared it's going to tip?
For sure. I am the definition of an average man. I am 5'9", and if J28 pops up next to the boat, his dorsal fin off his back is 6 feet tall. Out of the water, he's probably 6.5 to 7 feet. And so if a whale gets close enough to you, you are looking up at it, which is terrifying. And also when they exhale, it's really loud. So if you're just sitting there, like, looking down doing data or something, it's just like it's terrifying. I scream every time.
That's amazing. Oh, wow.
But for no random reason, like, we don't know why they do it.
Yeah.
Maybe salmon hide in the shadows under boats.
Oh,
Maybe
that's a
they're
good
curious. Maybe it has nothing to do with that. Maybe they're just bored.
Yeah.
So
They just thought they'd scare you for...
yeah, maybe they're that
giggles.
smart that they're like, oh, guys, let's go scare Taylor. Just screams every time. No,
That's
I
funny.
don't think they do that.
Maybe. Speaking of education and outreach, is there like a specific program out here that you would recommend to anybody who wants to get involved in either learning or doing things to help the Southern residents?
I don't know. Like you said, there's a multitude of different organizations out there that do different things. So I don't know, like if you live down in Seattle and you're interested in helping the whales, but they're not always down there, you know, there's beach cleanups you can do, there's shoreline restoration, there's river restoration, there's education groups you can get organized with. There's a lot of citizen science programs out there for southern residents and other marine mammal species, like counting birds, and, you know, even there's computer programs IDing humpback whales. They have citizen science programs that do that. So yeah, I mean, there's lots of different things. I mean, if you're interested in learning more, again, there's like a million websites. The Whale Museum website is great, has lots of links to other groups such as Be Whale Wise, NOAA, which is like the federal government that does a lot of the more in-depth research and management of the whales. They have lots of good papers and information, videos, infographics, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, they are the most watched whales. There's a lot of information out there about them.
Nice.
Very cool.
Well, thanks for letting us interview you. Do you have any final thoughts?
If you're out here in the San Juan Islands on a boat, don't get too close. If you see a little blue boat approaching you, wave, say hi. It's Soundwatch. We like snacks.
Any specific snacks? Like, what will attract a Soundwatch crew to you?
Someone threw us like a bag of like the Red Hots.
Okay.
And I was like, take them back.
Okay.
So no red hunt.
But yeah, no, I mean, we're out there like 8 hours a day, and we have volunteers that can come out with us in the summer on the boat. If you're interested, email soundwatch@whalemuseum.org. Yeah.
Awesome.
Very cool. Thank you so
Well,
much.
thank you.
Yes.